In this video, we're going to talk about the Simple Network Management Protocol, or SNMP, and the vulnerabilities of specific versions of this software. Now, before we start, I need to connect to my VPN because I'm going to be using some software that I have in the computer lab at Pecan. So I just established a connection to my VPN. Now I'm going to remote desktop into a workstation that has a software that I'm going to be using for this video. Alright, there's different tools I'm going to be using from this workstation, and one of them, it's the tool set from SolarWinds. There's a specific tool. This is a suite of tools, but for this video I'm going to specifically be using the Network Performance Monitor. I'm going to be using a printer for this video because printers, a network printer, it uses SNMP. But before I do that, I'm going to run Wireshark, and as you may already know, Wireshark, it's a tool that we use to capture traffic. Okay, so those are the two different tools that I'm going to be using. Now let me connect to my printer. All network printers have a web interface which uses HTTP, by the way, and it's not secure, and you will see that in a minute, but we're not going to talk about HTTP in this video. I do HTTP in another video, but you can still see there at the top says not secure. But the IP address of the network printer is 192.168.128.60. It's a Dell S2830DN printer, and I'm going to check the settings. The network ports. Now this requires a password. Now by default it doesn't have a password. I set it up a password because printers by default are not very secure, are not don't require any passwords to get into the settings, so it's important that you make those changes. I'm gonna hit TCP/IP, and here's my IP address, my network mask, and my default gateway. I'm going to click on security and then SNMP. If you look at SNMP, it uses version 1 by default, and you see that 1 and 2C are not secure. These versions of SNMP don't use encryption, so anything that it's sent in plain text, which means that if you're using tools like Wireshark, you will be able to capture. In this case, we're looking at the community string, and the community string, it's basically the password, and as you can see there, it defaults to public. I didn't change that, so the default community strings for SNMP most of the time for most network devices is going to be public, and this Dell printer is not the exception. Now I'm going to show you both SNMP version 1, and I'm also going to show you SNMP version 3 later. That way you can see the difference. So we're going to leave it like that. I'm going to leave the defaults. I'm going to run Wireshark now, and I'm going to start capturing some traffic. I'm going to minimize it. I'm going to open the Network Performance Monitor, and I'm going to add a new node. I'm going to type the IP address of the printer, community string. We all know that it's public. Now notice that I'm actually running Wireshark in the back, so the systems admin doesn't know that at this point. So here it is. I established a connection with the printer, and now I'm able to monitor the performance of my printer, which is basically the whole purpose of this tool from SolarWinds. You can see here, you check for availability. That way you can see if you notice any patterns if your printer has been failing recently. So that's the purpose of this tool. But anyways, that's not what we're discussing in this video. I was capturing all that traffic, all that communication that was happening between the SolarWinds tool and the printer. I was able to capture the SNMP traffic as well. As you can see, there's a lot of traffic here, all sorts of communication. So what I'm going to do, to make things easier for me, I'm going to filter by protocol, SNMP, and then execute it. And now you see that under protocol that it's all SNMP traffic only. You see the get request, which goes from the source to the destination, which is the printer, and then you get the response, which is from the printer to my workstation. That's all we see. Now if you look at this simple network management protocol, you see that the community, it's public. You see, and I was able to capture that because it's sent in plain text. That community string, which is basically the password, it's sent in plain text. That's why I was able to capture it. So here you see that SNMP version 1 and 2C, it's not secure at all. So you shouldn't use this version at all. So why is this a concern? It's a concern because you saw that the network printer, it uses this version by default. So you as a systems admin, you need to make those changes. I'm going to remove it because I'm going to do this again. But now I'm going to make some changes on my printer. I'm going to up my security on that printer. You see, straight out of the box, this is the way it looks. So what you should do as a systems administrator is disable it and make sure that you enable SNMP version 3. And SNMP version 3, it requires more parameters, and one of them, it's going to be a username and a password. Now the username, it's sent in plain text, but that's not a big deal as long as your password is protected, which is what really matters. I'm going to leave MD5 as my authentication hash. I'm not going to change that. I'm going to submit it. I'm going to make sure that Wireshark, it's still running. Go back to my printer. Let me run Wireshark first. Okay, now Wireshark is running and is capturing all the communication between my workstation and my network printer. I'm going to do the same thing. Now at this point, this is where I'm going to specify my SNMP version 3. I'm going to add the username and the password, credential set. This could be anything. Test123. Now this is what really matters, Frank. Now that's going to be sent in plain text, but that's no big deal. It requires the authentication hash. It's MD5, and this is my password right here. I'm typing my password, and I'm going to click OK. At this point, Wireshark, it's capturing everything that I'm sending. I'm going to test it. My credentials passed, and I'm going to click Finish. And you will see that once again, I'm able to monitor my printer using the Network Performance Monitor. But I'm going to go back to my Wireshark, and you will see that Wireshark was able to capture some information, but not the password. Again, I'm going to filter it. I get my request from the workstation to the printer and my response from the printer to the workstation. Little simple network management protocol. And now we see that we're using SNMP version 3, and you can see my username, but you won't find my password. So this is the reason that you should be using SNMP version 3, and you should disable SNMP version 1 or 2C for security reasons.